Tancredo.
I believe that it was mentioned earlier, and I certainly agree with the fact that, first of all, there are far too many criminal statutes at the federal level. The Constitution establishes the roles for the federal government and the state government. We have taken on far too many things at the federal level, especially drug laws, mandating certain penalties and that sort of thing. I do not believe that that is the responsibility of the federal government. That should be at the state level, and I would certainly not support, and as a way of reform, by the way, I would move the federal government out of.
We have more than they need long-term incarceration. In our state, we established over 20 drug courts that gave people an alternative course to rather than just putting them in prison, giving them the opportunity to get what they really needed, which is off the addiction. We've got to quit locking up all the people that we're mad at and lock up the people that we're really afraid of, the people who are sexual predators and violent offenders. But the nonsense of 3 strikes and you're out has created a system that is overrun with people, and the cost is choking us. I would go for more drug courts and for a lot less incarceration of drug-addicted people.
Thank you, Governor. Congressman Paul.
A system designed to protect individual liberty will have no punishments for any group and no privileges. Today, I think inner-city folks and minorities are punished unfairly in the war on drugs. For instance, blacks make up 14% of those who use drugs, yet 36% of those arrested are blacks, and it ends up that 63% of those who finally end up in prison are blacks. This has to change. We don't have to have more courts and more prisons. We need to repeal the whole war on drugs. It isn't working. We have already spent over $400 billion since the early 70s. It's a disease. We don't treat alcoholics like this. This is a disease, and we should orient ourselves to this. That is one way you could have equal justice under the law.
Colorado's most controversial politician wants to legalize drugs.
Former Congressman Tom Tancredo says the war on drugs is simply not working. 7 News reporter Steve Saunders is live in our newsroom. And Steve, Tancredo says this may be political suicide, but he says the issue is too important to ignore.
That's exactly his perspective. Always outspoken. Today was his first ever speech on this topic. He warns that the drug violence in Mexico is headed north, and in very blunt terms, he said the war has been lost.
And that is, first of all, I don't take drugs.
Before a group of older conservative Republicans, Tancredo delivered a very provocative message.
I am convinced that what we're doing is not working.
The former congressman says the country has spent billions of dollars capturing, prosecuting, and jailing drug dealers and users, and he says we have little to show for it.
That it is now easier for a kid to get drugs in almost any school in America than it is to get booze.
Tancredo believes legalizing drugs would save money and lives. Last month, ABC News reported on just how easy it is for dangerous, ruthless Mexican drug cartels to smuggle cocaine into this country. Denver is one of the hub cities for distribution.
And if you think it's going to stop there, you're wrong. This thing will eat us alive. We are not immune to it.
Some praised him for his honesty. Others say he couldn't be more wrong.
Kids will look at that and say, well, hey, you know, it must be all right because it's legal now.
For proponents of pot legalization, Tancredo is a welcome, some would say, surprising ally.
He said it's political suicide. Do you believe that?
I disagree.
Okay.
You know, I think that that's a myth.
People may not be ready for this.
Now, some people have speculated that Tancredo could someday run for governor or senator. Critics say his stand on immigration, so controversial, has made him unelectable. He tells me he really hasn't decided if he's ever going to run for office again. In the newsroom, Steve Saunders, 7 News.
Thanks, Steve. One other note here. Tom Tancredo says he would like individual states to approach drug legalization in their own way, and then other states, he says, could see.
I want to talk this morning about some Washington to talk about. Let's talk. Tonight we're going to think. Let's take a look.
Hello, lovelies. I thought this morning, I sat in my office and I thought, you know what? I think it's about time we legalize marijuana. hear me out for a second. We have to make a choice in this country. We either put people who are smoking marijuana behind bars or we legalize it. But this little game we're playing in the middle is not helping us, it is not helping Mexico, and it is causing massive violence on our southern border. We need to, how can I say this? Something or get off the pot. I'm just saying. Here's former Deputy Foreign Minister of Mexico, Andres Rosenthal. How are you, sir?
Hi, Glenn. I'm fine. Thanks very much.
You know, Mexico City is one of my favorite cities in the world. It is such a great city. I know you're there now. But it is a different world than the last time I was there, back in, I think, the early 1990s. And it's because of drug consumption. 50% of our the money going to these cartels is coming just from marijuana coming across our border. Is that right, sir?
Well, the statistics are, Glenn, that it's almost 60 or plus % of the total drug problem is related to marijuana exports and to marijuana being sold in the United States.
Okay. President, and this is what made me make this decision today, that we have to pick a side. There are people that say we should legalize marijuana in the states. President Bush said you can't do that because I'm going to enforce the federal laws. President Obama said I'm not going to change the laws, but I'm not going to enforce them. This is ridiculous. We either need to enforce our laws or change the laws. You believe that we're looking at sort of an Al Capone kind of scenario with drugs and prohibition. Could you explain that?
Well, I think there are a lot of parallels between the situation that's going on today and the situation that took place during Prohibition in the United States. Having made alcohol sales illegal to the public, what happened was that the criminal organizations got a hold of the business, not only of that business, but a lot of other businesses related to illegality. And it wasn't until Prohibition was repealed and alcohol sales were legalized, controlled, taking care that they weren't sold to minors and so on, that it was easier to get rid of these criminal gangs. And I think what we have is the same situation right now with drugs, especially with marijuana. As it happens, in the U.S., there is a tremendous demand for consumption. And if you leave it as something which is illicit, then the criminals will get a hold of it. They'll make a lot of money, as they have, billions and billions of dollars, in selling this to consumers in the United States. And the consequence is what we're living here in Mexico, which is this tremendous drug-fueled violence when the government has decided to go against these traffickers.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Here in America, people will say, you can't arrest people smoking pot because it's a victimless crime. Could you explain how it's not a victimless crime?